morning, guys and gals. Welcome to Miyagi Mornings, episode 29, I believe it is. And for those watching the video versus listening to the recap podcast on a Saturday, I am in my office versus out at one of the Miyagis, which is where we got the name Miyagi Mornings from. It's a little chilly, but that's not the real problem. I don't mind being a little cold to do the stuff outside by the Miyagi, which is a pond for those that are new. It's the wind. The wind is howling through the trees out there, and if I were out there, you would hear me like, hi, this is... And that's not good. Audio is key when it comes to producing video, believe it or not. All right, so today, I looked back at some of the questions that have come in over the last 20-odd episodes of Miyagi Mornings, and one was, what about tips for people that want to start a business? You're big on business, but what about the person that's sitting there going, I want to do this, but I don't know? This is difficult to condense into a 7 to 10 minute video segment. It really is. I've done entire shows on this. There's tons. If you go to the survivalpodcast.com and use the entrepreneurship tab, would probably be the best one. You can find tons of shows where I've broken down this stuff into incredible different layers of discipline in business, from marketing to financial analysis and everything else. I actually have some of my material is being used by professors in universities that are teaching business and marketing and sales to their people. So there is that level there. I can't do that in something like this, obviously, and you'd get bored if I tried to. So here's the deal. There's a place in business, and this is where I want to start out, for what you call irrational exuberance. I'm just going to do this thing, and I'm just going to do it, and I'm going to keep doing it, and I'm going to see if it works, and I'm going to learn from the failures, and I'm going to keep going. And that is mainly with sweat equity. Right now, we're going to talk about you're going to have to put some money into any legitimate business, period. But when it comes to like major capital, irrational exuberance is a formula for going bankrupt. So when you're talking about putting real skin in the game, thousands of dollars and up, you don't just throw money into a business when you don't know what it is yet. And when you don't have any track record or experience with business, when it comes to putting money into a business beyond the little base amount that we're going to talk about here in a second, I want you to think about it this way. If I were not me, if I were my friend, and my friend had my track record, and my friend asked me for $7,500 or $10,000 to invest in his business as a partner financially, would I give him the money? And if your answer is no, if my friend was me and knew what I knew and was going forward with this thing and asked me for $7,500 as a financial stake in the business where I'd get my money back when he got his money back plus a return, I wouldn't give it to him. Don't give it to yourself. See how simple that is? And so many people will give the money to themselves when they damn well wouldn't give it to anybody exactly like them as a pure investor. So that's kind of your first threshold with the money. What I'm talking about irrational exuberance, though, is most businesses can be started on some level of a bootstrap. Right? I know a guy who runs a full-time kind of microgreens farm now, but he started with, a couple plastic shelves and some lights and some trays, under $1,000, and he was in business. And if he had completely flopped and failed, he's at $1,000. Plus, he learned something like the tuition, like you could never buy a business course for $1,000 and learn what that would have taught him even if he failed. So that's an okay investment. And the irrational exuberance was, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to start knocking on doors. I'm going to start talking to chefs. I'm going to talk to anybody I can. I'm going to try to sell my stuff. I'm going to get some revenue, and then I'm going to figure out what to do with it. Great. That's where you should start 99% of the time. If you have to ask me how to start a business, then everything beyond that, you haven't learned yet. And you need to understand something. People look at someone like me and say, wow, Jack's done so many things that have worked. I also did a whole shitload of things that failed, and none of you paid attention to me when I was doing it because I wasn't public about it. And I wasn't not public about it because I didn't want to be public about failure. I wasn't public about it because I wasn't a public personality. Back in the 1990s, I was making a lot of money in sales, but I was still hustling my ass off with side hustles, learning how to build websites and do marketing and search engine optimization and all that stuff, and it led me down this path. And where I started was long-distance phone service. And I made some money on it. And in fact, I made some money on that business enterprise until about 3 years ago. So that went almost 20 years of money still came in. Small amounts, but it still came in. I still have money coming in from websites that are kind of like my second generation, where I was doing like Google AdSense on websites and stuff. Like people make money with YouTube with that, but it still goes on regular websites. I still make $100 a month off of that. But it's not a success. I can't live on it. But it was all part of learning. And so how does you go from building websites to sell somebody long distance service to being a podcaster in self-reliance and self-sufficiency, independence, and liberty, which is what the Survival Podcast is all about. You go on a walk. But it started with irrational exuberance. It didn't cost me a lot of money. I learned about hosting and all that stuff. So you got to do that. The big thing you have to not do when you start out in a business, and this is the most difficult thing for people to do, you have to separate work, effort, doing something from being productive. When we go to our jobs, our JOBs, as long as whatever we're doing, moving around, sitting in a place, bullshitting at the freaking water cooler, stamping something on an assembly, whatever it is, whatever the productivity threshold is for our supervisor and his supervisor. Basically, if my boss's name doesn't get said to my boss's boss because of me, I'm golden. Right? As long as, you understand that, right? When you have a job, that's your job. Whoever your boss is, you want to make sure that his name doesn't get spoken to his boss because of something you did wrong. And as long as you maintain that level of productivity threshold, you're golden. So we become conditioned to believe action and movement, and massive action matters, just like this shirt here I got from John Willis, right? Move with purpose, massive action is important, but the correct action is important. So what happens is Joe decides he wants a business, and he spends like 4 months building a website, where Joe could have took $500 and paid somebody to build him a website and got on with running the business. He thinks those 4 months of work count. Well, if Joe's going to be doing a lot of graphics design and web development in his business, they do. Their tuition. He just paid the bill for his tuition, and that learning will go forward. If he just finally got his website done and now he's ready to launch his business, those 4 months were mostly wasted. If he's not going to use whatever skills he learned doing that, those skills were wasted. And they count nothing for productivity. Because if he's going to sell widgets or a widget service, right, until he starts pushing the widget, getting feedback, adjusting the messaging in the product so that customers will pay for it, you're not doing any work. Not work that you get paid for. Your productivity threshold is now measured in revenue, not hours. And you can spend 14 hours a day literally, physically, mentally killing yourself and have a goose egg for productivity. So whatever it is that you're going to do, you have to focus on the productivity. How do I get this thing, whatever it is that I have, conveyed in such a way to another person where they perceive enough value in it to return to me some form of tendered capital? That is the key. And all the things you can do to fine tune and move a business up, those are all great, and you'll learn as you go. But people are like, well, I don't expect to have any revenue in my business for a year. Now, you could have a reason for that, right? I did. My reasoning was I'm building a podcast, a content-based business. I don't need to take any money out of it, but I know where I'm going. Very seldom is that the case. Most people that say, well, I don't plan on making any money from my business for a year, you're never going to make any money at all from your business ever. You would probably come out ahead if you took $5,000, walked out your back door, threw it in the furnace, and burned it. You'd come out ahead. Because if you're going to do that, you're probably going to sink $10,000 to $15,000 into your business and never make any money if you're not planning on making some money somewhere in the short term. Again, unless you know exactly what you're doing, exactly why you're doing it. And so I know that's difficult. So the big advice I have for you then is, if your business needs a website, and it probably does, and if you don't build websites, then the best thing you can probably do is hire somebody to build just a stock website for you. Use WordPress. It's infinitely expandable, and it can be done in other things. Get some decent graphics. You can probably get that done for $100 to $150. You have a person build a site, and if they do graphics, great. If they don't, hey, let's do it like this, and tell me my dimensions for my header and my footer and my graphics, and boom, get that, drop that in, and then yes, learn how to add a page, learn how to do a post, and then learn as much as you need to know about your website to do what your website needs to do to promote your business. For some people, that's daily content. For some people, that's just when someone checks you out or looks for Duck Eggs in Fort Worth, they need to find the static website so they can find you. Define which one that is, and then get that done, and then do everything else designed. Come see what I have. And this is the number one reason I see people with businesses fail. They'll say, can you talk to me about my business? And if I finally agree to do it, because I hate doing this, by the way. I do not do consulting. Do not ask. You cannot afford me. And if you can, I might raise my price just so you can't, because I don't want to do it. But I'll say, okay, well, tell me what you do. And that person will talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. And I won't ask any questions. I'll listen until the talking stops. And 9 times out of 10, I'm like, I still have no fucking idea what you do, and you don't either. You should be able to convey what you do in 5 sentences maximum and close it. If you can't do that, you have no idea of the value proposition you're making, so your customer doesn't know either. 5 sentences and 1 sentence to close, and that's maximum. You might be able to do it with 1 sentence and 1 sentence to close. And if you can, you should. If you can, you should. And if you can't do it, that's where you need to start. Write down a single paragraph, 4 to 5 sentences, and a close. And subscribe because, and buy because, and if you don't want to buy this, buy that. You can't do it, you don't know what you're doing. Figure out what you're doing, and then be able to convey it, and somebody might actually buy from you. Because until they buy from you, you're not in business. You don't have customers. A person that looks at your shit but doesn't buy from you is not a customer. Don't confuse that. That's another big mistake. Anyway, I hope this gets you in the right mindset. You can do this. Pour the irrational exuberance into the sweat equity, but make sure the sweat equity is something that sees to the long-term needs of the business. If you're going to constantly be needing to do web work in your business, then learning how to do that is good sweat equity. If you're going to put up a website and all you're going to do is make posts, pay somebody else to do that shit. Start thinking like an entrepreneur. The problem is, the last problem I'll give you is so many people come into a business like this. Yeah, I don't want you to pour tons of money in it. But at $500 to a couple $1,000, you're going to have to do that if you're serious. Right? And what happens is people start thinking like employees. I got to save money, save money. On some levels, as an entrepreneur, you have to invest in yourself. Just be careful how much and how. I'll get with you guys tomorrow with another subject.